Welcome to I'll Have You Know, a podcast from Rice Business. This episode is part of our Pivot series, where guests share stories of transformation in their lives and careers. Today, we're joined by Chris Stillwell, a Rice Business full-time MBA graduate from the class of 2024, who's taken a unique path from military intelligence to the world of finance. In the military, Chris built a foundation in leadership, discipline, and decision-making under pressure. He later transitioned to consulting, including time in Dubai, working on M&A integration and strategy. That experience led him to Rice Business, where he pursued an MBA to sharpen his financial skills and pivot into investment banking. In this episode, we cover Chris's military experience, why he chose Rice, how the program supported a major career shift, and his advice for veterans and professionals considering a career transition through an MBA. Hey, Chris, it's great to have you join me on I'll Have You Know.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I appreciate it. Appreciate being here.
You've had one of the more fascinating career arcs that I think I've covered, from military intelligence to strategy, consulting in Dubai, and now investment banking at Bank of America. I mean, I heard military intelligence, and of course, I'm thinking of all the Hollywood movies.
Mhm.
It's really dramatic. Everything seems so cinematic, right? And has to happen quickly, and it's life or death decisions. But I guess from your experience, there's got to be a gap in these portrayals and like the real substance of military intelligence work.
100%. I think that it sounds a lot sexier than it really is. Like, there's a lot of military movies out there. One of my jobs with the Army, I commanded a drone unit. And I don't know if you ever heard of the movie Eye in the Sky. I remember watching that. It was like with Helen Mirren. It's all about drones. And I remember watching that and was like, this is not how any of this works. This is like the complete antithesis of how we operate and how things are actually done. And I just remember like getting out of that movie just being like frustrated. So it's not as cool as some of the movies portray. Like, we can't identify people's faces from a drone 5,000 feet in the sky, but we could certainly do some other cool things for sure.
But you spent more than 5 years, right, in the Army, and you were in roles in Texas and New York.
Mhm.
Yeah, could you tell me a bit about those roles?
So I did 4 years active duty, and I did 1 year in the reserves in New York for a bit. When I was on active duty, I was stationed here in Texas at Fort Hood up in Killeen. Actually lived in Austin, used to commute up there. As an intelligence officer, I was primarily responsible for advising infantry or tank units on, what the enemy course of action would be. And I would have like a team of analysts that would assist me and kind of be like the red hat, we would call it, for the operations team, so that we can develop a plan to ultimately like defeat that enemy, whether it was in a training scenario or in a more forward deployed scenario. I spent 9 months in the Middle East as well, bounced around a couple countries. But yeah, mostly you do intelligence advising attached to those units. Then I had 1 year where I was command that drone unit as well.
So, I mean, all this is teamwork, and it seems to be situations where you're under pressure. Like, as a leader and as someone now who approaches teamwork, is this shaped kind of how you work across functions?
Absolutely. I think, the military is a unique experience for a lot of people, especially those going to be an officer after school, whether you go to West Point or ROTC. You're a 22-year-old kid, and then you're like, hey, here's a bunch of people you're now in charge of, their lives and their responsibilities. Go after it, and it's not, there's no like manual pretty much of how to be a good leader. I mean, there's plenty of books written about it, but you really do have to learn and, learn from not only your peers, but learn from people who are like more senior than you as well. And, as an intelligence officer too, it's kind of a lot of pressures on you as well as when you're trying to make the right call and give the right advice to your senior leaders, because bad advice or bad calls can really affect how you're operating.
I know you probably can't talk much in specifics about it, but I'm sure you're kind of on pins and needles until the operation's over and you know that the intelligence was actionable and accurate.
Yeah, and you're also doing work during the operation as well. You're assessing like how much of the, let's say, enemy forces that have been, attrited. So how much is remaining. You're also assessing what if there could be like a counterattack, let's say, or any kind of additional things that the enemy could do. And then you're also organizing and helping any kind of collection efforts and making sure that you're looking in the right places to see where these additional enemy like attacks could come from, and then making sure that you're sending that information upwards and downwards. And I think that's maybe a good segue into back to your original question is, how being a military officer helped me be kind of in my current role and even at Rice was, in the military, you are a leader, but you learn how to be a good follower as well. And I think what you do with that is like you are able to have great teamwork. You're able, like in my current job now, I have an analyst underneath me, but I have people like VPs and MDs above me, and I can understand what their intent is and what we need to get accomplished in our day-to-day job, but also articulate to the, people below me, hey, this is the intent and this is how we do it. So it's kind of been very helpful in those soft skills.
Definitely. So that would be one of the, I guess, mindsets that you took from the Army. Is there maybe a habit that you developed that you still lean on today?
For the military, I would say definitely getting things done is maybe the wrong way to say it, but like, or maybe getting a decision made. I mean, the worst thing you can do in the military is be indecisive. You got to make sure that you make decisions under pressure. And even today, like, I see it sometimes, to my detriment or to my benefit. I want to make a decision now, where some people might want to sit on it and deliberate, and like, no, let's just do this, let's go for it, and let's adjust accordingly. So that's definitely something I continue to do now.
In corporate America, I see a lot of decisions get to the back burner. So you're exactly right. Like, how do you push it and say, how do we get this decision point, make this actionable?
Even just advancing meetings, like people so many times will just sit around and just wait for someone to talk, and you're just sitting in this meeting for like extra minutes, or like, no, everyone's dancing around a question or dancing around an answer, and you just like, you got to progress the meeting, and you got to go, okay, let's go to this slide, okay, let's move here, let's move there.
So, Chris, could you tell me what inspired you to join the military?
Yeah, I mean, my story was not like super profound. Like, no one in my family served in the military. Actually, I just did. I was an Eagle Scout, and Boy Scouts really exposed me to it. I wanted to serve my country, so I did ROTC when I was in college. That was kind of my drive.
Awesome. I'm an Eagle Scout too, but I didn't go as far as you. What was your Eagle Scout project?
So I went to high school in New Jersey, and New Jersey's very, I guess, old. And so there was an old cemetery there from the 1600s. There were people buried at 1700s and 1800s there as well. And one person was like from the Revolutionary War as well as a veteran. And so they needed somebody to clean it up and document like who's even buried here. And so that's what I did, was I cleaned up this cemetery, documented all the gravestones, took pictures, and kind of put a little memorial there, and so that people could visit and stuff like that.
Oh, that's fantastic.
What was yours?
Mine was in Malaysia, in Kuala
Wow.
Lumpur, and it was with the SPCA. And dogs get kind of a tough case there. So we repainted and cleaned kennels, and we had this mural in the front that had dogs and cats and everything painted on it. And it was really pretty. It took way longer than I anticipated and was much bigger of a project than I thought I signed up for. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. 4 weekends in a row painting.
I can imagine. It's rewarding, though. I think the Eagle Scout project, it's definitely something that not a lot of people get to do, and it definitely helps a lot of people in the community.
It does. So your pivot one, I think, is from Army to consulting in Dubai. How did you end up there? Was that kind of the focus? Was it, okay, geographic choice, I wanted to go abroad, or was it consulting and the geography was the bonus?
Yeah, great question. I have a very, I guess, weird path to consulting in Dubai, which I was not expecting it. One, already being in the Middle East when I was in the military, I thought I would never go back to the Middle East. And lo and behold, I ended up going to Dubai. Luckily, when I was in the military, I actually was in Dubai. So at least I had been to that city before. So I wasn't foreign to it. And consulting, when I was in college, I interned pretty much every semester and every summer. And on the summers, I actually interned 2 years in consulting. So I was familiar with the space. And when I was leaving the military, I had an offer from Deloitte in DC. And then Kearney actually reached out to me. I didn't apply to them. A recruiter reached out to me and said, hey, we're trying to build out our Dubai office. We had some success hiring a couple of veterans. Would you be interested in coming to our office? And I was like, oh, actually, I looked at the firm. I did some research, and, they're a great kind of boutique consulting firm, kind of similar, I would say, strategy to what the MBBs do in terms of like strategic consulting. And I was like, you know what? It'd be really cool to live abroad, maybe for a year or two. And when I moved out there, I thought I was going to only be out there for a year or two, and I ended up being out there for 3 years. So I did enjoy it.
So you spent time at the Mall of Emirates?
Yeah, I lived nearby, so I could walk there if I wanted to.
It's actually the first place I ever skied was in Dubai at the Mall of Emirates.
A little icy though, right?
Yeah, not great, not a good experience, but yeah,
Yeah,
still get to say you skied in the desert, so that's something.
absolutely.
So 3 years as an expat, I grew up as an expat brat. I had my own experience with it. Be curious about some of your takeaways. What did you think about living abroad as an American?
similar to, I would say, most Americans, I feel like, or I should say a lot of Americans, we love to travel. And I've traveled a lot around the world, even before I lived abroad. But living abroad, I think, is a completely different kind of experience than just traveling and being somewhere for a week. Like you miss small things like pretzels. I don't know why, but pretzels was incredibly hard to get in Dubai. And I don't really like pretzels that much, but just the lack of it made it more attractive. And then there were just like small nuances of like, oh, wow, this is actually something that's significantly different in terms of how something operates in a foreign country compared to like your home. But Dubai was an interesting place to be because it was such a melting pot in terms of different cultures in different countries. Like I would go to a British grocery store, like there's an Indian grocery store. There was, a local grocery store. I mean, like there were so many different country influences. And I think it's even reflected in the people there as well. And I thought that's the coolest part about living abroad is meeting people from all these different countries and different cultures and different backgrounds that you're not used to. I'm a big golfer, and my golf group, was myself, an Italian guy, a British guy, a South African guy. So it's like who's who of different countries. So it's really cool.
It's a real melting pot. So I guess professionally, living there, you're being challenged already, kind of being pushed out of your boundaries, even just beyond the 9 to 5. What was the 9 to 5 like?
Yeah, I wish it was 9 to 5. That'd been cool. I would say I am the worst case study for careers in terms of 9 to 5. I don't think I've ever had a 9 to 5 career yet. As a consultant, as you talk with even people that go to Rice and get into consulting, you do a lot. I was traveling every week. It was 4 days in a hotel, and like a lot of times, you work till midnight maybe, or maybe you're done at like 7. It all depends on what you're working on. But basically, as a consultant, I was with the client. And the hours are a little different for the client. So they were there from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the Middle East because I
Yeah.
mostly worked with Emirati clients. And then from like 2 p.m. onwards, I went like back to my hotel or back to my office, and we would kind of work as a team from there. The business language is English as well, which was interesting, very helpful for me. That's why I think so many people from all of these different countries could come to work in the Middle East. But yeah, consulting, is sitting with the client, doing a lot of PowerPoints and presentations, a lot of deliverables, advancing kind of the plan that you've set out and meeting all these different milestones that you promised the client. And then you've always got a little bit of BD on the side, business development and recruiting as well. I used to do interviews as well for, people trying to get into Kearney. But yeah, that was kind of a high level view of the day to day.
Yes. I mean, with your background of wanting to get projects pushed forward and get to a decision point, I mean, consulting's a perfect fit. You're seeing the problem of the client, you're giving them the solution, right? And implementing it. Is there a project that stood out to you in your time in Dubai?
There was one in particular, we were helping to merge kind of two government organizations together, two like ministries into a single ministry. And so that involved developing a target operating model, meeting with clients. And, it's kind of nerve wracking sometimes when you're just this young guy going into meetings and you're deciding the fate of an organization, even with headcount. And you're deciding what the new organization is going to look like, what's its roles, responsibilities, what's its mandates. Obviously, you're not a decision maker, but you're facilitating that decision, and someone higher than you is making those decisions, especially on the client side. That was just a very unique experience. It was one of the first times I was exposed to like very senior people who were decision makers in a country, and like it was going to make lasting impacts on how they were going to operate as a government.
So, this being your first pivot, were there moments where there were like aha moments of like, oh, yeah, this makes sense. I know how to do this because of my previous experience in the military?
Yeah, actually, it doesn't answer your question, but it was a very humbling moment for me. When I first joined consulting, I thought I was so great at PowerPoint because I had done all these PowerPoints in the military, presenting to senior leaders and saying, look at these cool slides and maps that I used to like show. And then I get to consulting and I had this manager who was like, these are terrible slides. You need to do better. And then he obviously taught me how to do it better, but it was like, oh, there's actually an art to this PowerPoint thing. And there's actually an art to how you structure a presentation and how you present to clients. And maybe in the military and a lot of other maybe corporate jobs, that art is not really practiced or understood. And I think consulting and now even banking to an extent really hone in on that skill. So maybe that kind of answered your question too, but it's definitely a
I mean,
humbling
the
moment.
challenge with pivoting, and there's
Yeah.
things that you think, yeah, I'm fantastic at doing this, but maybe not. Maybe it's an adjustment to a new language and you pick it up. So you're in Dubai and you're thinking about the US and you're thinking about an MBA. What pushed you to say, okay, this is it? Now is the time.
Yeah. So I initially, wanted to stay only abroad for a year or two. In the military, I had deployed. I had spent a lot of time away from home at training in the field. And I wasn't expecting to live abroad. COVID also hit while I was out there. And because of that, that actually extended my stay there as well, because things in Dubai actually were kind of better than America in terms of like golf was open, restaurants were open a lot earlier than it was in America. I didn't really get some of the additional travel I wanted to do, like to Europe or to Asia. So I wanted to stay until things opened up. And then when things opened up, it was great. I got to do that. But then I hit my 3 year, kind of almost close to my 3 year mark. And I was like, all right, I've done my time here. I want to go back to America. What are my options? I was weighing going back with my company and maybe pivoting. But I decided that I enjoyed consulting, but I really didn't enjoy living in a hotel 4 days a week anymore. And then when I was looking at careers, what to do, a lot of my colleagues, consulting is a post MBA job, and a lot of my colleagues had MBAs and were telling me about it. And so I was like, all right, let me look into MBAs. And my picking of an MBA, I'm glad it worked out for me in terms of getting to Rice, but I really only wanted to go back to Texas or Florida because I lived in Texas before I came, and my family lives in Florida. And I like golf, and it's nice warm there all year round, and there's no taxes, so lots of great things. So when I was looking at schools, Rice was the best school ranking wise in terms of 2 states. And I was like, all right, I applied round one. So let me see if I get in. If I get in, good to go. If I don't get in, then I'll maybe look at some other schools. And I got in, and I was like, great. It was like December of 21 I got in. And I was like, great. I gave my notice to my company and kind of told them I wanted to leave around March time frame. They were like, yep, no problem. So stayed there for a couple more months, came back and started my MBA career after that.
Wow. So beyond no taxation in the state of Texas and our phenomenal ranking, was there anything specific about Rice that really drew you into it?
I was looking for some things like smaller classrooms, for example. Like a lot of people we hire from Kearney were like from Yale or HBS, and like their class size was like 1,000 people. And like I think Rice, especially in the first term, really forces you to go to classes, to do your homework, to learn the materials. And that was attractive to me as well because I didn't come from a finance background at all. So I didn't even know what a DCF was before I came to Rice. So I was very grateful at that, getting to Rice and realizing that it was such a good platform to be integrated into.
For those who don't know, what is DCF?
DCF is discounted cash flow, and it's the analysis, and it's basically a model to help understand the future cash flows of a company. And at the end of the day, you're arriving at an intrinsic value of what the company is worth.
So, okay, you get to Rice, you jumped in, you got involved, you were in the Finance Association, you were the co-president. Obviously, you were in the golf club, the Veterans Association, and the MA Right Fund. Were you just trying to do a bit of everything to network and see where you wanted to go? What was the plan here?
Yeah, I think I think it's my background or my drive. I'm always someone who tries to get involved in things and be a part of clubs and then maybe rise to leadership in clubs as well. I did that in my undergrad. I do that now. I'm involved in on a board of a charity. And so at Rice, I did investment banking recruiting my first semester. And I felt like the Finance Association there did a fantastic job in training us and prepping us and mentoring us to get a banking job, to get us up to par in terms of the knowledge. And so I felt that, then obviously I got an internship offer. And then when my second year started, I wanted to kind of give back to the organization. And I ran with my friend Jasper, who works at Wells Fargo, for co-president of the club. And we won. It was such a rewarding, I would say, second year, kind of helping shape the class below us. And even now, I'm still friends with a lot of people who recruited even the year below us, and kind of still talk to them and run into them in the tunnels of downtown Houston.
That's great. Yeah, the classmates are always the biggest part of the program and the relationships you take afterwards as alumni. What part of this experience at Rice made the biggest impact on you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely getting a job, 100% for sure.
You took a giant leap here, so that's fair answer.
Yes. But overall, I mean, like you go to get your MBA, one for a job, but two, it's also for networking and the connections you make. And I moved to a city where I knew nobody, to a school where I knew nobody, into a career where I knew nobody. And now I feel like it's almost really hard for, like, my mom still wants me to move back to Florida. And I think it'd be almost really hard for me to do that because I've made so many friends at Rice. I have friends that I go golfing with every weekend. I have friends that every single bank pretty much in downtown because we all recruited together. I've just made friends through friends who've been in Houston for a long time. So, you make this great network just going to Rice. And I feel like people at Rice in particular, they take the work seriously, but not themselves, if that makes sense. Like, you find your good people at the end of the day.
Folks are willing to work really hard. They're willing to share information. And I feel like people who take themselves too seriously are the ones who are competitive and not trying to maybe, share the wealth.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, this is basically you going into your next pivot, going into investment banking. Was there like now an elevated sense of confidence of, okay, I've done this before, I'll do it again?
Maybe some blind confidence sometimes. Yeah, you could even ask my parents. I went home for like 4 days for the Christmas break the year I was recruiting. And I was like studying flashcards with my mom of all the IB 400 questions. And I was like, I'm not going to get a job. Like, all these people around me are much smarter than me. We've got a really talented pool of candidates that are recruiting this year. But, I felt like at the end of the day, the Finance Association and Rice, just the classes I took, really prepared me to understand like the basics of finance, the basics that are expected of the interview process. And then going forward, I saw it when I started as an intern at the bank. I went to New York for a week. We were training with all these people from all these different schools, going to all these different groups within the bank. And some people didn't even know what a DCF was, or like didn't know how to do it that well, I should say. We were doing some practice problems, and I was like, wow, we're actually far ahead of a lot of these other schools and people. So that was kind of good to see that, Rice really put an effort into training us up. And nowadays, I'm still involved with Rice in the recruiting process, just on the other side now. And like, they have a boot camp that they do where they train the students going into investment banking. Every weekend, they give them a different class that are taught by either bankers or teachers. They still have a mentorship program. So I think that Rice invests a lot of into its students that maybe some other schools, you'd just be a statistic.
So for folks who might want a career in investment banking and don't have your mother to help them with the flashcards, you would say the RISE program does a great job in helping them in the recruiting phases.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at especially in Houston, we've got the proximity to the banks here. If you're recruiting into energy banking, Rice is one of the best schools to go to. We've had a great kind of placement program over the last decade or so. If you look at the number of bankers across the different banks in Houston, there's at least one or two Rice people at each bank.
So as an alumni, there's ways to volunteer after, right? And to come back and help students through recruiting.
Absolutely. I mean, there's, I believe it was the year after me, the Finance Association started a mentorship program where not only they can help mentor MBA students that are getting into banking, but also undergrads that are getting into banking as well, because we also recruit analysts out of the undergrad population. And so they've partnered with the Rice Business Society and the undergrad school. We've also, on the recruitment side, there's the IB Advisory Council where we work with the Career Development Office with Rice, and we help kind of set the rules every year. We help advise them on what banks are looking for in terms of candidates, in terms of like with stats, GMAT scores, stuff like that we're looking at. But there's so many ways to give back. So it's been great.
So, okay, you've got, military consulting background, your MBA in pocket. You show up day one for your full-time job. What were you leaning on? What comes to mind of the skills that mattered and maybe the ones that you could have freshened up on?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the skills that were plus going into the job was consulting experience 100% helped me, especially PowerPoint skills, interfacing with clients, navigating just the corporate structure. Super helpful from the military, just having that leadership presence and working with, understanding how to manage analysts and manage people above you as well. But obviously there's a lot of unknowns. I think in investment banking as well, maybe this is the scary part where it's like there's so many details and there's so many things that you don't know, like how companies are structured, how to value them, like, especially I don't come from an energy background either. So I remember when I was at Rice, I was always asking my petroleum engineer friends questions about the energy industry and how it works. And then day one, you step in investment banking. It's not like they're saying, here's this class you're going to take for 1 week on energy. It's like, no,
Yeah.
they're gonna start throwing acronyms at you. You just gotta learn. And then you get staffed on 5 things, and you're like, okay, I don't know where I am, but I'm gonna figure this out. So I leaned on a lot of things that I guess soft skills to help me, and then I had to really hone in on the hard skills to kind of bring me up to speed. And it really is learning by fire hose. But I think that people who are successful, they show that they can actually absorb the information, work hard, and meet the expectations of the bank.
Yeah, so you're at Bank of America, you're in the Natural Resources Energies Transition Group. So what does your role look like? What does your day to day kind of seem? I know it's not 9 to 5.
Yeah. And that's kind of the cool thing. That's why I've maybe have chosen the 3 careers that I've had so far, and now investment banking as well. There is no defined day. Every day is different. It's very dynamic. You do know obviously what you're going to do, but like it can change in the blink of an eye, and I find that exciting. I really would hate to do the exact same thing every day. It would be like Groundhog Day, but instead, like even today, I'm on a sell side right now, so we're helping sell a company, and we had a bunch of management presentations where we're presenting the company to these select potential buyers. And that's a very interesting experience because I'm sitting literally at a table across from a CEO of another company and listening to questions he has about the company that we're selling. And that's like a really interesting thing for me. And then there's other times where it's like you're just trying to figure out why this number on these 2 slides don't tie and why they're different. It's like there's very different elements of the job. I mean, there's a lot of people skills as well. I think I really like in the military as well, you're kind of given a task and not always kind of a guardrail of how to get that task accomplished or like a roadmap to do it. And in banking, it's kind of similar. And a lot of times you kind of have to extend your influence outside of your like chain of command, for lack of a better term. And you've got to talk to people across different product groups, across different elements of the bank to get things done. And that's kind of exciting to me too, because you get to talk to different people, meet different people as well. But yeah, and then sometimes you're just in the model, just building in a financial model, all these different Excel backups, and then outputting those things into a PowerPoint slide to make it more presentation friendly for clients. It's kind of eye-opening, and it's kind of interesting to see what risk tolerance some companies have versus other companies. What, in the energy industry, like if you're talking about upstream, like where do they want to drill? Do they want to exit? Do they want to stay? What price points are they really sensitive to in terms of like future operations? It's interesting.
If you had to give advice to folks thinking about a pivot, what would you kind of give to them to do it successfully?
Yeah, I think doing your research is the number one thing. I think just having an assumption or just looking at something at a very high level, like I'll use banking just as an example, but like if you look and you like say, oh, banking, they make good salary, they make good bonus, I want to get into that, but then you don't do the research to see what is actually required for the recruitment process. Like it's very defined. Consulting is also a very defined recruitment process. You have to meet all these little tick marks. You have to dress appropriately. You have to coffee chat. You have to meet the right people. Then there are other industries, that even like out of an MBA, like for example, venture capital or marketing, where those recruitment pipelines are not well defined, and it's mostly about networking. And so I guess behind what I'm saying is like just do your research and like really understand if you want to pivot into a certain industry, understand what you have to do to get there. And the best way to do that is obviously looking online, but also, going to the right school and then reaching out to alumni or reaching out to people who are interning in that field and understanding how they did it.
That's great. And I guess the other thing I think about, you've seen leadership in the Army, global consulting, and now banking. Has your definition of leadership evolved through each of these?
That's a good question. There are certain people who can be leaders and are very good at being leaders. But being a good leader in the military might not translate to being a good leader at banking. And a lot of times you actually see that, or you see like military officers leave the military and go into the corporate world and not be as successful. Because I really think you do need to tailor your leadership style to the industry you're working in, and two, the people you're working with. Different ways of operating motivate people differently. Like in the military, you can yell at somebody and hold them to a higher standard and maybe they'll do it. But like if you yelled at somebody like, a marketing job, they probably would shut down and like that'd be the end of it. Like it really doesn't work the same. The leadership style is something that you have to adjust to the area you're working in.
That's great. And I think it's so true. If you started yelling at me through a Teams channel, I'm going to hang up.
Yeah.
We're not going to get very far. So in all of this, I mean, I know you're a big golfer. Is there something that you do to stay grounded to perform at your best?
I mean, you definitely need to de-stress, of course, and you got to have that social interaction. This is just my opinion. So, like, golfing is one of my outlets to do that. Get to be outside, get to be with friends, get to challenge myself, and something that is outside of work. And sometimes it's very frustrating, and sometimes it's very rewarding when you hit a good shot. But just hanging out with friends, hanging out with family is also important to me. Working out, traveling, and seeing new places and new people, all great stuff for me. And then maybe occasionally binge watching some TV when I have time.
You ever hit a hole in one?
I wish. I wish. That's still in the cards for me, hopefully one day.
Okay, you got a long career in golf ahead of you, so maybe it'll happen.
Yes.
So when you think of the next few years out, are there like specific challenges or opportunities that you're excited about to take on?
The interesting thing about my career, even currently, there is an element to progression. There is a defined path. And with each positions, your job changes completely. You still obviously have to do the basic skills of the job and understand how finance works and how energy works and whatever. But then VP, you start to blend client interaction and business development with also reviewing the work and making sure it gets done. And managing director, it's like mostly building that business development, giving it strategic advice to clients. So it is kind of exciting that like my life will always continue to change. It's not going to be like set in stone. I'm going to be in the same job forever doing the exact same thing. So that's always exciting for me.
As you pick the right field to grow into, and there's plenty of opportunity in the different levels that might be ahead of you.
Exactly.
So, for anyone listening who's considering an MBA as a part of their career pivot trajectory, especially veterans or career switchers, what's one piece of guidance you'd want to leave them with?
I would say, pick the program, plug in Rice. Hopefully Rice is your program they choose, but, pick the program that makes the best sense for the career that you're choosing. I didn't come from an energy background, and I really learned so much about energy just taking these different classes at Rice, like geopolitics of energy or energy in transition, and going to refs as well. And, I wouldn't have gotten that experience at maybe other schools.
Well, Chris, first, thank you for your service. Really appreciate it. And also, thank you for joining me on I'll Have You Know and for sharing your story. This has just been a great conversation.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate, being chosen and being on here as well. Thank you again.
Thanks for listening. This has been I'll Have You Know, a production of Rice Business. You can find more information about our guests, hosts, and announcements on our website, business.rice.edu. Please subscribe and leave a rating wherever you find your favorite podcast. We'd love to hear what you think. The host of I'll Have You Know are myself, Brian Jackson, and Maya Pomeroy.